Hi, this is Dan Korver, pastor here at Dalton Hill Baptist Church. We're a small Baptist church located in Owasso, Oklahoma. We're small enough to know you, but we're big enough to serve you and for you to serve as well. Our vision is to rescue, restore, and return to service. Rescue a non-believer or a believer who has been hurt or is lost, restoring them to Christ in fellowship with other believers with the desire that they in turn will help others along their way.
We've been going through a series on Hezekiah a little bit. It was actually heroes and villains, and then I said it was too much material to try to cover all of Hezekiah in 1 week. So last week, if you remember, we had talked about with Hezekiah heroes on display. In handling adversity, I think it's actually that would be for this week when you think about it. Hero on display, handling adversity. Anybody have any adversity they're facing? I think it's interesting when you look at, we're going to see it today, basically on how to do it. Last week, if you remember, we saw a hero in the making, related. I think first of all, remember from last week, replacement. He replaced a very wicked king, his dad. I think it's important, irregardless of our past, good or bad, we can't blame him on it. We are responsible. And so he would turn out good, even though his dad was not. He was good and his son was not. And so I think it's important to see it. He also, if you remember, he had reforms. He started off with all kinds of reforms, and you think about anytime you have reforms, you go against at 25 years of age and you start telling the people you're going to change how you've been living. You're going to quit following idols and worshiping God. And so he did that. He also had the route in which he took. You remember, he clung to God. He listened to the Word of God and everything else. So important. He had restored the temple, which was nailed shut, and all the Passover and things that needed to take place. He also then, it was interesting, he took had his scribes take the writings of Solomon and put them in part of it in Proverbs to preserve it, which we have today. So the recording. So it's just important when you look at just how he started off so well and was doing so well. Today, as it's going to always be the case, we're going to always have handling adversity. Any of our heroes in Scripture just about had different adversities. You think about it, did Abraham and Isaac, was that any type of adversity? You said go offer your son. What about Daniel in Daniel 1 and his friends with the food? You think about it. What about his three friends when they have risen in power, doing well, and they're told to bow down? Adversity. And you go through, there's others that you have. How'd you like Elijah and Ahab going up against Jezebel? 1 versus 450? That sounds like some fair odds, doesn't it? Adversity. So I think today I'd like to just think about the hero on display, and just it's basically mentioned in 3 different passages. We're primarily going to, it's in 2 Kings, it's in 2 Chronicles, and it's also in Isaiah. So we're primarily going to be in 2 Kings and a little bit in 2 Chronicles 31. So if you want to keep it there, we won't go to all of them just so you won't have so much flipping back and forth. But I want to, first of all, just stop to think about it when you look at it. The first one is the plan for adversity. How do you plan for it? I think we need a plan for it. Notice in chapter 18 of 2 Kings. When you're planning for adversity, I think first of all, stand against the enemy. Notice what he does in verse 7. The Lord was with him, talking about Hezekiah. Wherever he went, he prospered. He rebelled against the king of Assyria, did not serve him. He defeated the Philistines as far as Gaza. Remember, that would have been 5 city-states, so he went against them. And he also territory and watchtowers of the fortified cities. So he rebels. Obviously, the Assyrians took over the northern tribes. He also was coming after them, the Philistines, obviously, and so stand against the enemy. I think so often you can appease people. It's interesting what some of you might have heard Churchill's statement was. He said that England's lost her buildings, France has lost her soul. And a lot of truth to that when you look at World War II and what took place. And it's so easy to do that. So first of all, stand against the enemy. The second thing, and this will be in the 2 Chronicles part, chapter 31. when you're planning for adversity. 2 Chronicles 31. He starts setting things up in verse 20 and 21. 2 Chronicles 31, 20 and 21. And thus Hezekiah did throughout all Judea. He did what was right, good, true before the Lord his God. Every work which he began in the service of the house of the God, in the law and commandments, seeking his God, he did with all his heart, and he's prospered. Second thing I notice, besides standing against the enemy, is are we seeking God in his service? Notice it said he did it with his whole heart. How do we serve the Lord with a whole heart? Or do we only do it because we're being noticed by people? Now, adversity is going to come. And I think it's interesting. So go back to 2 Kings now. And you'll see the parts that are going to take place. In the verse 9 down through 12, what you'll find is the Assyrians take over the northern 10 tribes. And the reason they take it over is because the northern 10 tribes didn't serve the Lord. So God used the Assyria to conquer them. And what's the capital of Assyria, by the way? It's very important in history. What's the capital of Assyria? Nope. Nineveh. Now does that explain to you why Jonah didn't want to go to Nineveh? You think about it. So here he has, first of all, the third thing in the plan for adversity, handling it on your own. Any of you ever handled adversity on your own? Notice the wrong way to do it. Starts down in verse 13. The 14th year of King Hezekiah, so that makes him 25 and 14, makes him how old? 39. Sennacherib, king of Syria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and seized them. How many cities do they have? 46. You think about it, you're going along, everything's going great, and 46 of your cities have fallen. Jerusalem hasn't yet. What are you going to do? What he does now then, he basically in verse 14, Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria, I have done wrong, withdraw from me, whatever you impose on me, I'll bear. So king of Assyria required of Hezekiah 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. Now how much is that? Today's standards, how much do you think that is? It'd be $36 million in silver and $94 million in gold. Where are you going to get that? He starts taking it from his own house, but in 16 he takes it from God's house. How did they get the gold in God's house? From the free will offerings of the people giving it to God and paying their offerings. What right did he have to cut it off of God's house to give it to him? He didn't. His house is one thing, but he didn't have enough of his own. But how many times do you and I, when we're in the midst of adversity, try to handle things on our own? And what you'll find, anytime you try to give in to things like this, whether it's a hostage situation or whatever, are they ever happy? If you gave me this much this year, what is going to happen next year?
Want more?
They're going to want more. And you're not going to have it to give. So notice what he does then. He now does it the right way. If you would, turn over to 2 Chronicles 32 and see what he does do. So he's basically sitting and talking about the king is sitting outside the city. You find that in verse 1. And he'd come to take over Jerusalem. And so notice what he does in verse 3 and 4. He, Hezekiah, decided with his officers and warriors to cut off the supply of water from the springs which are outside the water. And it helped them. So many people assembled and stopped the water. Does the enemy need something to drink? All right. You're coming. So do what you can. We're going to eliminate your water source. What he also does is he digs just under 1,800 feet of through a solid rock to bring water to Jerusalem, so that it's underground. Thinking about it, it's still there today. The archaeology has seen it, so that their water is coming to the city. Because usually what happens, you stop it, and then people starve to death, they have nothing to drink. So he has an underground water source that he brought to his people. Notice in verse 5, he rebuilds the walls and erects towers and builds another outside wall. All right, you're coming to make war. We're going to make this city very, very difficult to take. So again, cut off supplies, rebuilds the walls. In verse 5, he also makes weapons and shields. That'd be important. Do what you can. Weapons, shields, preparing for it. All that is good. Notice in verse 6, he appoints military officers over the people, gathers them in the square, and speaks encouragement. So, do you need organization? You're going to have people organized in how to fight, how to do, what people are on what wall. Nehemiah did the same thing. Remember, in Nehemiah, he put people in front of where their family was. So if your family is in Owasso, and I'm not going to have you stationed on that part of the wall, how well are you going to defend it? He wouldn't put you over, down in Gordon Gina's area, over there down Coweta. Hey, we're not going to put you over there, because you'd run and go where? You'd run up to Owasso. So notice he's putting them, it's important to see it. Notice in 6 and 7, he encourages them. It's important in verse 7. Be strong and courageous, do not fear or be dismayed because of the king of Assyria, nor because of all the multitude which is with him. For the one who is with us is greater than the one with him. Now it's easy for us to say, but how many people Assyria has conquered? Every nation. Nobody has stopped him. He's got an army of 185,000+ outside. You don't have anywhere close to anything like that. But notice what Hezekiah is saying is very, very true. Put your trust in the Lord. So think about it. Plan for adversity. We sometimes do it on our own. And what happens when all else fails, then what? We turn it to the Lord. But you can do a lot of wise things. And I think it's important for us to do the things that we can do. I had a friend of mine and his wife, I remember, he had a good job working, and she goes back to work, and he says to her, all right, I want you to take kids in college, I want you to take 25% of your income, or whatever it was, and put it into retirement. Now, how would you feel if you were told your husband says, give you 25% of your income? Well, do you think that helps them out today? They're planned for it. The guy that trained me at the refinery, every year you would get, he'd get a 3% raise, roughly. He said, the whole time I've been there, I've lived on the same amount that I started with. The rest goes into retirement. You take 3% and you work there 40 years. He was a millionaire easily. He worked because he liked to work. But most of us don't want to pay the price today to help out tomorrow. But you notice they plan for adversity. What adversity are you planning for? Most of us get caught off guard. What part are you playing, and what part does God play? We do our part, but we have to trust God on his part. Notice also the ploy of the enemy. Notice in verse 17, what's the enemy going to do? We're back now in 2 Kings, if you would. 2 Kings 18, the ploy of the enemy. You notice from 17 down through 21, you can primarily see it down in 20 and so on. He basically challenges them, and he says, why? And in 21, now behold, you rely on the staff of this crushed reed, even on Egypt, on which if a man leans on it, it'll fall. So first of all, he challenges your alliances. Hey, Israel or Judah, don't trust on Egypt. Man, if you lean on them, they're so weak. Don't even trust them. You notice the second thing he tells them not to do. But if you say, we trust in the Lord our God, is not he whose high places and the altars you've torn down. Hey, don't trust in God. He obviously doesn't understand. Hezekiah tore down the false places of worship, not the true place. You know, why trust in God? How well did it help the northern 10 tribes? Next thing, notice he says in 23 and 24, don't trust in your own abilities. He says, in fact, I'll give you 2,000 horses if you have even enough men to sit on it to fight you. I'll even give you the horses, and we'll go out and fight. I'll give you 2,000, and we'll meet in battle, but you don't even have 2,000 to come out and fight us. Look at the odds, guys. You're weak. There's no way you can do it. Notice in verse 25 what he says. Have I come up without the Lord's approval against this place to destroy it? The Lord said to me, go up against this land and destroy it. That is true of the northern 10 tribes. That wasn't true here. But he's using that. Okay, so think about it. Hey, God's given all these other nations to me. Why would he not give me this one? How many times does our mind think like this? When you think about it. Notice the next thing that you have in 26 to 32, he now starts to speak in the language of the Judeans, and they want him to speak in Arabic, so he now is going to attack your following. How well can Hezekiah, he can be wanting to follow the Lord, but basically they're saying, hey, look around you people. Nobody stood against me. If you want to live, surrender. And then of course he lies and says, we're going to take you off to this great place. Look at the Assyrians, what they did to the northern tribes. One of their habits, one of the most brutal people at the time were the Assyrians. And they'd put hooks in people's noses and their ears and everything else, and they'd lead them basically on a string, and you'd pull them. They were pulling people, and you'd cause them to intermarry and weaken them and so on. So notice what he's saying is, hey, if you want to live, surrender. And most people want to survive, so what will most people do? Surrender. Notice the next thing he does in 33 down to 35, he says, consider history. All these other nations that we have gone against, don't they have gods? And not one of their gods has helped them. Nor is your God going to help you. The ploy of the enemy. Stop and you think about it. Are those same adversities happening to us today? Alliance, don't rely on God. You know, don't look at your own ability. You can't do it. Don't rely on other people. Hey, maybe this is part of God's plan. Everybody else has failed. You will too. So you can see this when you have those different things. So what are you going to do if you're Hezekiah? Think about it. Let's look at what he does do. In chapter 19. Chapter 19, 1 to 4, Hezekiah tears his clothes, covers himself with sackcloth, enters the house of the Lord. And he also sends out in verse 2 to Isaiah. And notice in verse 3, this is what they said to Isaiah. This day is a day of distress, rebuke, and rejection. For the children have come to birth, and there is no strength. Perhaps the Lord your God will hear it, and the Lord will heal it. So they offered a prayer for the remnant. So he asked Isaiah, go to Isaiah the prophet and ask him to pray. You'll also find that Hezekiah prays. How important is prayer when you think about it? So he asked for prayer, and if you look in 14 to 17, you actually see his prayer. Hezekiah gets the letter, and he brings it, and he goes into the temple, and he lays it out before God and says, this is what they're saying. And notice what he says, and I think it's so important in 15. Hezekiah prayed before the Lord and said, O Lord, the God of Israel, who art enthroned above the cherub, thou art the God, thou alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth, thou hast made heaven and earth. Incline thy ear, O Lord, and hear. Open thy eyes, O Lord, and see. Listen to the words of Sennacherib, which he has sent to reproach the living God. Truly, O Lord, the king of Assyria has devastated the nations and their lands, and have cast their gods in the fire. For they were not gods, but the work of men's hands, wood of stone, so they have been destroyed. Now, O Lord, our God, I pray, deliver us from the hand of all the kingdoms of the earth, and know that thou alone art God. He's ours. We can't stand against him. Nobody else can stand against him. All of them are false gods. He's now attacking you, God. It's now attacking you. And it's an attack on you. When would you deliver? Does he tell him how to deliver? Does he tell him when? He doesn't tell him any of that. So I think it's interesting. Do I ask others to pray for my adversity? We're doing that a lot. The prayer chain, everything else. It's really, we need to. We also need to pray ourselves for the different things and recognize it's ultimately up in His hands. And I think it's interesting when you look over in, I'll just read it in Second Chronicles 32. It makes this statement when it talks about the praying and believing in verse 20 and 21. King Hezekiah and Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amos, prayed about this and cried out to God. Notice they both cried and prayed. And it says that the mighty army, you're talking about the Lord sent an angel and destroyed it. And if you look back in Kings, God sends an angel. And what happened? Notice in chapter 19 of 2 Kings, verse 35. You pray, God sends an angel. And notice in verse 35. It happened that night, the angel of the Lord went out and struck 185,000. That's a pretty big army. And one night destroys them all. But he doesn't touch the king. Because Isaiah said the king was going to go back and he's going to be embarrassed, and he goes back home and he's in his temple and his sons kill him. That's exactly what happened. So you think about Sennacherib attacks God, and God wants him to see who really is God. And he kills 185,000. By the way, this also starts the demise of Assyria. So you lose that many people. So you think about it. Here you have it. You turn it over to God. God, He's right. I've prepared. I've done all I can do. There's nothing else I can do. It's your battle. He's attacking you. And God answers it. I think it's important for us too. We don't know how He's going to answer. You don't know. So obviously God delivers him. So he has the physical things. But notice just after this what else is going on in chapter 20. I don't know if you've ever noticed this before. In chapter 20 you have physical adversities. In those days Hezekiah became mortally ill. So you mean Sennacherib's doing this, all this is going on, and now you are mortally ill. And you are a godly individual. And what normally happens, you don't usually have two in a row. So you think about it. Isaiah comes up to him and he says, set your house in order, you're going to die and not live. How'd you be feeling about it right now? Have you been serving the Lord? Have you been doing everything you can possibly do for your people and for everything else? Notice what happens then. He does. So he tells him the course, what's going to happen, the circumstances, the course. And notice in verse 3, he calls out for mercy. Remember now, O Lord, I beseech thee. I have walked before thee in truth with a whole heart, and have done what is good in thy sight. And Hezekiah wept bitterly. He's honest with him. You find the same thing in 2 Chronicles and also in Isaiah. Man, I've done everything. There's nothing that I could have done or should have done differently other than possibly giving the stuff off the temple. So he asks for mercy. I want you to think about it if you're Isaiah too. You go up and you tell him you're going to die. Okay, so Hezekiah prays, you leave the room. So you leave here, and by the time you get to the car, Glenn, God says, go back in and tell Dan he's going to live. Now, how many of us would we be thinking, well, hold it. He's sick, he's about to die, and I'm going to go back. Okay, what does that also say? God, does he hear prayer? He's not of the tribe of Levi. God hears prayers of a righteous individual. God hears it. So notice he's going to go back. You are mortally ill, you're going to die, and now I'm going to go back in and say you're going to survive. What's Isaiah supposed to do? Be obedient, right? So think about it, what's happening here, when you look at all these different things. Was it a political adversity going on? Is there social adversity going on? Is there economic adversity going on? Is there economic adversity? Is there physical adversity? You're getting hit with all of it. Your entire family, everything at one time. And I don't think we read the stories, but they're a human being just like you and I. And they're looking at it. Notice what happens then. He's told to return. It's also interesting. God hears his tears and hears his plea, and he's going to heal him in 3 days. But you think about it. He told him to make this paste, this poultice out of figs, and put it on him, on his eyes. I mean, you think about it again out of obedience. Was it some magic potion? No, it was in God's hands. But notice what he tells him in 6. I'll add 15 years to your life. I'll deliver you this city from the hand of the king of the hand of the king of the Syrians. I'll defend this city for my sake and my servant's sake. You're going to be spared. The city's going to be spared. The next chapter is going to go on and say you're going to have 2 years of really, really tough times before it all takes place. But I want you to think about it. You look at it, and God now gives him a sign, and it does happen exactly the way they said it would in 3 days. So think about it. What physical problems are you facing? How of us would even go to God in prayer? Doctor says whatever. Okay, we're not denying that, but God can still heal if he so chooses. Do we take it to the Lord? If I was Isaiah, what would I have done? Lord, that's embarrassing. I just told him he was going to die. Obedience. Do whatever God says. So I think about it, we look at a lot of different things we have here too, but do we need a plan for adversity? It's coming. It will. Okay, what about the ploy of the enemy? Are they going to use people? Are they going to use circumstances? Are they going to use all these different things? Words of other people, and so on. It's all going to be there. But then we can pray and turn it over to God. And we will have physical adversity. Anybody in here not had any physical adversity? Maybe you haven't got old enough yet. It will.
Hang on.
Just a matter of time. But we're turning it over to the Lord. And see it. So you think about it, we have this hero and he tells us how to handle adversity. Do your part, turn it over to the Lord, and ask for mercy, and accept the results that he gives you.
We'd love for you to come and visit with us and fellowship with us. We're located at 8263 North Owasso Expressway, which is on the east side of Highway 169 North, between 76th and 86th Street North. We have coffee and fellowship from 8:30 to 9 Sundays, followed by Sunday school for all ages from 9 to 9:45, and our Sunday morning worship service is from 10 to 11. We likewise have a Wednesday night service for all ages from 7 to 8. Now may the Lord of peace himself give you peace at all times, and in every way the Lord be with you all the time.